You don't have to be a Rockefeller to do what the Rockefellers do. You could do the same thing, whether it's in a W-2, 1099, a business owner, as generate your income, position your capital, and then leverage that to go and invest real estate and grow and scale that real estate portfolio.
The Apartment Gurus podcast is brought to you by Greenlight Equity Group, an apartment acquisitions and holdings firm co-founded by Carl York and Tate Siemer, host of this show. We offer you the opportunity to be an owner of cash-flowing, wealth-growing apartments without the headaches of being a landlord. These assets are recession-resistant, risk-mitigated, offer significant tax advantages, and are a great alternative to the stock market. Ready to check it out? Go to www.investwithgreenlight.com today to book a personal consultation with Carl or Tate. Again, that's investwithgreenlight.com. We look forward to meeting you. Welcome to The Apartment Gurus, where twice a week, host Tate Siemer brings you deep dive interviews with the wisest gurus in the apartment investing industry. These experts are sure to create game-changing value and inspiration designed to catapult your business to the next level. Be sure to reach out to Tate at www.investwithgreenlight.com for access to his investor portal and Calendly link. And now, here is Tate Siemer and the Apartment Gurus.
Yeah, the location freedom thing, man. I'm either doing it from the beach in Mexico. I'm on the beach of Lake Michigan here, so.
That's the thing.
Yeah,
We were just in South Africa for a month too with the kids. And it's just like, I can't imagine designing my life any other way. That's why I'm asking. And we homeschool too. So we can take our kids and, pack up and go for a month or 2 months wherever we want to go and, do different experiences and that kind of stuff.
We're just going to roll here. Remind me and listeners kind of where you are, MC.
Newtown, Pennsylvania.
Right. Yep. Cool. Listeners, this is going to be an awesome one for you. I'm super excited to have my friend MC Laubscher here on the show with me. First things first, go to LinkedIn right now. If you're at your computer or on your phone, do a search for MC Laubscher. So Laubscher, MC Laubscher. You will find a wealth of resources and newsletters to sign up for. 3 different podcasts. MC is a thought leader extraordinaire in especially the alternative investing space, and we're gonna get into that. But first and foremost, he's a husband, father, multiple business owner, investor. He has his own podcast and has written 4 different books specific to building wealth. And he's a leading expert in alternative wealth strategies and alternative asset investing, which we'll talk about exactly what that means. He helps business firms implement and execute alternative wealth strategies. So again, bringing that value to the biggest, baddest out there and creating huge value for them. And then I mentioned the podcast. So Cash Flow Ninja, Cash Flow Investing Secrets, and Cash Flow Ninja Banking, guys. So that's where you want to go on Spotify and anywhere else you might get your Apple Podcasts. Obviously is where most of us use these days, and or Spotify. So those 2 spots will definitely have those 3 podcasts. So Cash Flow Ninja, Cash Flow Investing Secrets, Cash Flow Ninja Banking. The Cash Flow Ninja podcast has been featured in Entrepreneur Magazine as one of the top 48 podcasts for entrepreneurs. That's huge, guys. We all know how many entrepreneurial podcasts there are out there, and to be recognized there is an amazing achievement. And then the 4 books, we'll just mention Get Wealthy for sure, which is the most recent book. We'll talk about what's in this latest and greatest from MC. And you can go to his landing page and get a copy of that. You can also subscribe to his newsletter called The Wealth Dojo. And last but not least, if you're not already blown away, MC is a member of the Forbes Finance Council and the $1 Million Roundtable. Amazing stuff. And if you know what those are, that's elite level stuff. So MC, dude, super excited to connect with you in this way and bring value to the listeners and get to spend this time with you.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this conversation. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah. So let's just jump right in. let's kind of go back to the time freedom, money freedom, location freedom conversation, and then we'll get into alternative investing. But you mentioned travel here recently with your kids. You got a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old, and which are such fun ages. And you were doing sports with sounds like baseball over the weekend with them. What out of those 3 freedoms, is there one that kind of is prioritized or maybe most appreciated in your life?
Yeah, I think you mentioned time freedom. That's one of the best ones, right? Freedom of time, freedom of money, freedom of relationships, and freedom of purpose. Those 4, as Dan Sullivan from Strategic Coach always talks about. But freedom of time is you get to determine how you spend your time, who you spend it with, and where you spend it. And of course, money, financial, is a thing that fuels everything else, right?
Yeah.
So sure. having that is fantastic. Having diversified income streams that pay you every single month, and then relationships, hanging out with who you want, where you want, doing fun things together, and doing things that is aligned with your purpose. So I can't say enough about it. It all starts with a vision too, right? If you're listening to this and you're saying that sounds incredible, where do I start? Well, first you have to design the life that you want. There's no way you can build it if you haven't designed it first. It's a hard lesson I learned, and like 10 years ago, because I was involved in a lot of businesses and investments. And, I was working, and this was just around about the time my kids were born. So, so like 10, just a little under 10 years ago, I started to realize that, hey, I've had success in business. I've had success in the investing world, but I basically built a prison for myself in both of those verticals because I didn't have the freedom to just, grab a suitcase or a backpack and jump on a plane and go where I want to and, spend the time where I want to, however long I wanted to, right? So I broke it down back then. And people thought I was insane when I started to do it, but I just took a hammer to it and just started hitting and breaking everything back down. And it was very painful because you kind of take a step back to take a massive leap forward eventually. Right. So you take a couple of steps back, and then, I figured out, okay, this is what I want my life to look like. These are the things that are important. This is actually what I want to do. How do I build a business and an investment portfolio to then make that happen? Mm-hmm. So, so that's why I said it sounds kind of cliches to say you got to design it and have that vision. But I'm telling you, if you don't look at it every week, at least I do, and I have a vision board, you're going to get off track. And before you know it, you're just building another prison for yourself. And you try to escape, if you're listening to this and you have a job that you love, but you want something else, or you have a business that you might not have the freedoms that I shared. You just have to start with the designing phase first and be aligned and just keep on it and keep building towards that design that you have.
Yeah, you can't get where you're going if you don't know where you're going, right?
Right.
And I think I think a lot of us felt, and this was my story in single family up until 2020, is just like do the next step in front of you the best you can, and then the step after, and that was kind of the single family game, one deal at a time for us. We didn't ever figure out how to scale that, which is why we got into multifamily. But it really comes down to when I coach my clients now in my mastermind, one of the very, very first steps is creating a vivid vision. And we actually work directly with Cameron Herold's book. And so listeners, if you want an action step in terms of this early conversation with MC, and you get the importance of having a map and having, or, in our world, right, it's pulling out Apple Maps or Google Maps or whatever you use and putting in a destination and having it route you there, right? And we've got all these tools in all parts of our lives to automate in ways that we haven't had before, but it can't be overstated how key that is. And I would just sprinkle in one last little tidbit, if you will, to not worry about the how you're going to bridge where you are to where that vision is. right? It's more about the what than it is the how, at least in the vision creating process. And the how's kind of, that's a step or two down the road. And a lot of times the hows kind of show up for themselves in many ways. So yeah, super key. Another way of saying, I think what you just said, MC, is like, you didn't get where you are by mistake at all.
No, or luck. I think, because,
Yeah.
you and I had a conversation. We spent about a month in South Africa, where I'm originally from. It was just visiting family and friends. And we intend to go back there in the future and spend some more time there and even longer to different parts. And, we continue to do that kind of stuff and generate these experiences because we had a plan. Everything is very intentional. One of the things that I shared is, the big homeschooling trend in the United States and many other parts of the world, by the way.
Yeah.
So I looked at the education, and my wife actually has a master's in her education, and in education, and taught for years, almost 20 years. So we looked at all this stuff, and I'm passionate about education. I'm in the education space, more the financial education. And I looked at where everything was going with AI. I looked at the trends, and I'm looking at this going like, look, 5 years ago, schools already couldn't prepare children for the world. They couldn't. There's just it's an old, outdated model, right? It's this sitting down at a desk with bells ringing when you can go eat your sandwich, simulating the factory setting was great for the Industrial Revolution and the industrial age, right? And then we went into the information age, and nobody's adopted. It's just still this Prussian-based, like, industrial age schooling system, and the same with universities. It's just incredible where people go to universities for marketing degrees, and they have no idea even like what the latest marketing trends are, because they're changing every week almost. There's no way you could keep up to date with that. So, and with AI, the disruption coming there. So, taking that into consideration too, and then homeschooling and making sure that, we incorporate these kind of things into the future. That's all intentional. Like you said, none of this stuff is, and now it's the hardest thing to do. All these things are not easy. Every single, if you're building something worthwhile, it's not easy, and it's hard and tough decisions. But again, 5 years down the line, people are going to say, oh, this was a genius move, because, now they can market, and they understand sales processes, and they know AI and all that stuff already as like young teens, and have started several businesses already on their own. And that might look like, either luck, which most people would say, but no, it's very intentional. So I think that's a big takeaway for your listeners too, and your viewers, is the intentionality of everything that you do in every part of your life.
Well, and just to literally hammer that point home, the destruction process that you went through, which was part of the creative process ultimately, right? I mean, that takes a huge amount of decisiveness, which to me is a secret sauce in being an entrepreneur, is powerfully deciding, being decisive. Once you decide, no looking back, you do it. And that's what you caught the vision for, where, maybe you didn't have the very, very specific vision of like where you are now, but you at least caught a future vision that inspired you enough to bust up where you were. And it sounds like where you were was not a bad place to be. And knowing you, I'm sure that you were probably kicking some butt, and probably most of us would just stay and try to make that as good as possible for ourselves. But those of us, those of you that go big out there and make the really, really, really big things happen, you got to be able to tear it down, whenever you decide it's time to tear it down. And when you tear it down, tear it all the way down and start all the way, and just go after what you're going after. And the creative aspect of destruction was what I heard in that whole process for you. What wasn't working in that previous life that you had created for you that really inspired you to make the changes?
The freedom part of it. I just felt like I had a background in sports, right? So that's how I ended up in the United States. Came and played in a league up here till 2007. So I already went through the process of rebuilding stuff because your sports career is over, and then you start basically building a new life. And I was doing stuff while I was playing sports. The money that I earned and generated, I used to invest. That's when in 2001, I started and bought my first single family real estate property. So, and I was reading books.
Did you still have your athletic career going at that point?
Yes.
Yeah.
I always say, when you're on sports teams and on buses, there's a lot of traveling. And you could pick up a lot of bad habits during those times, right? Video games and all that kind of stuff, which most people do. But I was the guy with the economics books and, reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki and reading real estate books and The Art of the Deal, right, Donald Trump and all those books. And then I took action and I bought my first property and I started learning. And I, single family, had some tenants in there that paid the bills. I paid, they paid the rent. I paid all the bills. There was cash flow at the end of the month left. And I'm like, how many times can I do this over and over? And of course, then the lessons start, right? But I took action. But back to your initial question, there's been a series of reinventing myself already processes, leaving South Africa at that time, for opportunities overseas, ending up in the United States, having a career in sports up until that point, then reinventing myself, and then, eventually getting some success in business and investing and figuring out, this is not, I need to reinvent myself again because I don't have the freedoms. And then building today Producers Wealth, where we serve business owners and investors in all 50 states in the US. And then Cashflow Ninja, which started as a podcast, but it's just an educational company. We've been downloaded in 180 countries, 7 million times.
Amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, I could never have imagined that part. The framework was right? So, but now you just got to color in the rest of it.
When you look at that, I mean, it sounds like you almost did that aspect of it without trying, MC. Like what you did was you chopped the wood, you built the house, and then 180 countries showed up to check the house out. Like what does it feel like that way to you? Or I mean, like that part of it, I don't see you going out and like saying, I got to get this book in every language. It's more about like, let's make the best damn book we can here and add as much value as we can. The rest kind of goes from there. Does that feel right? Yeah.
Yeah. I think and it's all trends too, right? So at that stage, when I started building Producers Wealth and Producers Wealth was up and running, my firm, I was looking for an avenue from a marketing standpoint and a learning standpoint, because a lot of our clients were in many different businesses. And I looked at this and I'm like, there's so many cool ways to generate income. And then the alternative asset world, which is just the alternative to Wall Street. Wall Street controls the marketing, right? It's like, these are assets that have been there for hundreds and even thousands of years. They're not alternative assets. They're just real assets, but they're alternative to the mainstream assumption about if you have money and you're going to go invest it, you're going to invest it in the stock market, right? It's actually really, if you think about it, it's kind of amazing that we have that conditioning as a society and as a country. Like that's, you just make the assumption, if you have money, it's, you're going to invest it in stocks. Like, no, there's many other great avenues to go down. I mean, without getting into trashing the stock market too much, I mean, can you kind of speak to that? Like what's important to you about, offering investment avenues and opportunities for investors outside of the stock market? Yeah. And I think that's the message that resonated right there with Cashflow Ninja. Cause I looked at the different ways people would generate income. And then I'm like, I need to do something about it, write a blog and interview other folks that are on different alternative asset niches so that I can learn more. And why don't I share this with my current clients and maybe other people? So then I looked at avenues and I look at, YouTube videos and that kind of stuff. And I'm like, how do I consume my content though? And podcasting we're talking, this is early days, right? But it's not like today. when I started Cashflow Ninja, people were like, what's a podcast? But I consumed my content. Really, I followed one specific individual. You've probably heard of him, Peter Schiff. Peter Schiff is an interesting character. He had blogs, and he had a weekly radio show, which he then downloaded that MP3 and threw it on. It was called iTunes back then, that you can then basically listen to it. So I couldn't listen to his live show. And then I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. Who else is on here? And I would find all these other people. So as I was driving, I was working out, and I was just working, I just listened to podcasts. So I'm like, that's how I consume content. And I'm assuming that this is how a lot of productive people consume content, because they're on the go. So I chose the podcast avenue because it doesn't compete with anything else, right? Yeah. You can drive and listen. You can work out and listen. You can work and listen. Where a video, you have to look at the screen. And I think the message that resonated to your question was this alternative asset world, because people started to see, oh, he's talking about how to invest in, I don't know, mobile home parks, how to invest in, apartment buildings, how to invest in self-store, all these different kind of niches. And that really resonated because people started to realize that, oh, wow, I can directly invest in other investments outside of the stock market and generate income. I can have great tax benefits. I can put myself in a position to benefit from the appreciation of the value of the asset. So there's a nice upside kicker. And then also I get to leverage the skill sets, capabilities, networks, and capital of like Cashflow Ninjas, great operators and great sponsors. Like, I don't know what part of this is terrible. So I think once the message got out there, it resonated. I think that's why it spread it like wildfire, because it was one of the first shows just covering that specific world and landscape. And in the 4 books at Cashflow Ninja that we put out there, we've reviewed over 90 different niches within the alternative asset world. And we do a deep dive on each one, what they are, why investors enjoy it and invest in it, what the ecosystem of each niche looks like, how investors can generate income or grow their capital. How do they lose money? A very important thing too, right? How does this go bad? And then also what's the positives and negatives? And we run it through a filter to filter whether it's a good niche or not to invest in. We call it the investment opportunity filter. And, we share that kind of stuff. And that really resonated. But providing an avenue outside of the mainstream for people is it's been an incredible journey. And by the way, anything mainstream right now, there's a massive challenge against anything mainstream, whether it's in health, whether it's in wealth, whether it's in education. And usually when you go non-mainstream, there's a lot of just an incredible world exists there with incredible opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, to be mainstream, the first thing came to mind for me is like, you and I are in the business of influencing education, bringing people information, bringing people ideas. But you and I don't have advertisers. At least I don't at this point, and maybe you do on your podcast. But we don't have we're not owned by huge corporate interests. We're not owned by for-profit interests necessarily, directly anyway, right? And it gives us the ability to say and talk about whatever we want, which is authenticity, which is, to me, that's one of the most valuable currencies out there these days, especially in the influencer space. Is there's so many dialed in on point influencers that are bringing it from their heart and their place of authenticity, that if you're not doing that, you're probably not going to compete. And that's one of the things that when you go to cashflowninja.com, which I highly recommend doing, that's you're going to find all these resources there, right? You're going to find the 3 podcasts, the books, some other downloadables. But you're going to see right on the homepage is it's a mission-driven business. It's a mission-driven movement, is what they say. Cashflow Ninja is a digital media company, right? That's the vehicle. But what the vehicle does is it changes how people learn and think about wealth, capital, business, and investing. And this is key. The mission is to help business owners, in this case, achieve self-reliance, independence, freedom, and sovereignty through actionable education that enables them to live and leave a legacy. And look, the fact, I mean, that's such a powerful mission, and there's some huge words in there. So, I mean, I think if you have one of those four things, self-reliance, independence, freedom, and sovereignty, you're already living a winning life. If you have all four of them, wow. And then if you throw in the 3 or 4 degrees of freedom, like that's living a large life, and it's living an impactful life too. And the fact that you're in your case, your mission is about other people, right? It's about serving other people to get them to their best life. Like, to me, you can't lose. That's a can't lose formula.
Yeah, I think a big part of it too is looking at the blind spots that business owners have, right? And we try to help them with that. So you just mentioned, so with Cashflow Ninja, a lot of people talk about just the freedom, which is fantastic. And I love that. We threw in the self-reliance and sovereignty. And a lot of people thought before 2020 that that's kind of like an overkill. And then in 2020, they started to realize, oh, wow, this is what he was talking about. That self-reliance and sovereign part, because you might have been free, like, for example, financially free. But what could you have done at that stage? I mean, you were restricted with your movement. And most people that were doing really well financially and were financially free, they didn't have access to their own water, their own food that they grow themselves, their own land, or have a community of like-minded people that they can count on, or that, that they can interact with. People started to realize, oh, wow. And coming from South Africa, that's the angle that I brought. I'm like, listen, if you think about yourself and your family, the biggest things are water and food and then protection. And that's kind of like bringing that mindset that I still see over in Africa over to the US. And it sounded crazy initially, but now it's not that crazy anymore, right? So it's been great to share that. And with Producers Wealth, we do the same thing. What's people's blind spots? We look at a strategy where a lot of people would just do the one thing in their strategy and throw as much capital as they can into investments. And we say, look, you got to have a strategy, because investments, you're putting your money in a vehicle, which can, of course, you're taking on a lot of risk so that you get a higher return. And if it's done correctly, it's controlled risk, right? It's strategic. It's done strategically. You know the asset class, you know what you invest in, you know why you invest in it. You vetted the sponsors, the operators, the deal, you know the strategy, the exit strategy. Like, this is not you're not going into this blind. But you can lose some or all of your capital in those deals. So we bring in, like, look, if you can bring in a vehicle of savings that's liquid, growing, tax-free, that you can access at any given point in time, when things go south in any particular investment, which it can, then you can, number one, you have that buffer of cash. And number two, if the market, we have market cycles, if the cycle changes, you can go into the market and then buy assets at a discount because you have cash. So we talk about that kind of stuff. That's kind of the blind spot. So both of these businesses really the mission basically is just sharing these blind spots and helping people fix them, our business owners.
Yeah. So Producers Wealth is, if you'll check that site out too, listeners, that's, you're getting into family office stuff and tax strategies, insurance strategies, like kind of some of the risk mitigation structural things that you'll want to do when you have the levels of wealth and liquidity and everything else in place, if you will. And I'm sure you'd say it's never too early, MC, to start doing this stuff, right?
Absolutely not. The best time was 5-10 years ago, but you don't have that. So it's right now. Yeah. So my philosophy has always been, and this is an approach that I learned very early on, which was a blessing, is that, Tony Robbins talks about success leaves clues. There's a blueprint out there. So you find people that you want to emulate, and they have a blueprint, and you implement and execute it. I was very lucky to find a person that became a good friend through the rugby community early on in my life. And I saw what they were doing. And this family was very, very wealthy. They had a family office. Before I knew what a family office even was, I was like 21, 22 years old. But I kind of saw their setup. I was playing and traveling all the time. I read Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, where he talks about the rich don't work for money. They work to learn. And, I was unemployable during that time because I was pursuing my career in sports. But this friend of mine said, look, our family owns a ton of real estate, multifamily. If you want to learn that game, just jump in and we'll throw you in somewhere when you're in town or when you're not traveling. And I started to learn that from the bottom, picking up trash at their multifamily units, right? All the way to running construction crews, turning over apartments, painting, doing maintenance, all that stuff, running that to eventually doing property management and managing 500 plus units for them, getting my broker's license, being part of the acquisition team. And then while I was doing that, having great lunches and conversations, he showed me the other stuff that they were doing. We'd meet for lunch. He's a lawyer, he's insurance person, he's life insurance person, and he's tax person. They would all be at lunch. And I always wanted to know, hey, what's a life insurance guy doing here, right? And then he was telling me that, look, we have a family operating business that's been in our family for 3 to 4 generations that produces the capital. The capital is then put into a very specifically designed life insurance contract. And this is where we warehouse our cash, which is kind of funny because they were also shareholders in a bank. So it's kind of comical.
That is comical. Yeah. They're running their own family bank, but they own a public bank. Yeah. That's
exactly. That's why. And it blew my mind. And then they would establish credit lines against those life insurance policies, which were overfunded with capital. And then they would buy real estate, multifamily real estate, and were some of the largest owners of multifamily on the north side of the city of Chicago. So, and they would just do that over and over, and that was their system. And then they would also invest in other operating businesses here and there. But it was just fascinating. And I looked at that, back to your original question, and I'm like, how do I do that? And what I learned was, because people always get they overcomplicate things. We humans are strange creatures. So we look at things and we go, no, that's too much. I can never do that. But what I realized is you don't have to be a Rockefeller to do what the Rockefellers do. You could do the same thing, generate your income, whether it's in a W-2, 1099, a business owner or an investor, generate your income, position your capital, just like the Rockefellers in these overfunded life insurance contracts, infinite banking, and then leverage that to go and invest real estate and grow and scale that real estate portfolio. And you can do it on a smaller scale. And that's what I did. And of course, the lessons I've learned, the strategies have gotten more complicated as you go on, 10, 15, 20 years down the line, but just start somewhere. And you can emulate, that exact same strategy that I just shared very, very easily.
Well, it's heartwarming for me. It hits right here in the heart. And maybe for some of the listeners too, that you got your start in multifamily and just picking up trash in an apartment community, right? Like this is the Apartment Gurus podcast. And that's our vehicle, right? That's what we're all, as a listener base, as a host, as all my wonderful guests that I've had on over the last 4 years, like that's the game we're all playing in one way or another. And, some of the guests were specialists and brokers and blah, blah, blah. But we're all in that game. And I think what I love about you and the way that you've just turned everything around to the point of serving at such a high level is, and I saw this with myself to some degree in starting the podcast and then getting into coaching and being an influencer thought leader, kind of 10x the whole, even being a podcast host for me, which I still love. But what you come to realize eventually is that the multifamily game, which I still love that, right? There's so much about it that I really do love, and being of service is one of those things. But that's the vehicle, right? Like that was the, and I love that was it for you too. Like you saw this vehicle, this car, if you will, passing by in the form of a connection, somebody that was up to big things and was willing to really be a mentor to you, it sounds like, or at least a model and a guide and point you in the right directions. And you were able, like, this was kind of one of my superpowers throughout life, I think. And it's one that I think entrepreneurs should all be pretty good at. It's like, if you can watch somebody do something, you can probably figure out how to do it, right? It's the whole copy your way to success, as my mentor, Corey Peterson's book title says. Like, it's you're not in the business of reinventing the wheel here. You may be in the business of inventing and packaging the value and knowledge base and resources and wisdom and everything else so that you can go out and serve other people. But as far as the vehicle that you're going to drive to income, wealth, cash flow, appreciation, tax advantages, et cetera, I'm a huge proponent in mentoring, finding a mentor, finding a coach. I've gone myself the paid coach mastermind route, and now offer those services myself. And would you agree with that on the kind of the not recreating the wheel and like you say, I mean, Tony Robbins, success leads, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, I love the asset class. I'm an investor in it, general partner and limited partner in my portfolio. Again, was a general partner in a lot of deals and became a limited partner. I actually enjoy that more. Again, it all depends what you want, right? If you want that freedom that we're talking about. So, but yeah, I love the asset class. And like I said, my first property was a single family. And then I was in the single family game, saw the multifamily game, and saw what was possible and started right at the bottom, learning the business, which was an absolute gift. I mean, I look at that and I'm like, it was a gift. And to your point with success, I love that, copy your way to success, and success leaves clues, like Tony Robbins would say. Absolutely. Find the blueprint. Find, and by the way, a lot of my mentors that I've had, they don't even know that they're really my mentors, but I found someone and I'm like, I like this guy's marriage. So I ask questions. The quality of your life is determined by the quality of the questions that you ask. You don't have to have all the answers. I like this guy as a parent. I ask him questions. I see, like, oh, that guy's a great parent. This guy's a great business owner, and has built this business. This guy's a great investor. This guy's a family office setup and structure. He must have probably, through some of those lunches, felt like he was having lunch with the Riddler, just asking questions. But I was just asking questions and kept learning. And then stuff from that I would take and go, oh, wow, I got to learn more about this. He's so focused on taxes constantly. And then he's like, if you think about it, MC, like if I can reduce my taxes legally by 20% this year, like, what return do I have to get in the marketplace out there that's going to beat that? So you're already winning that year just on one move. And now you have more capital to deploy and more deals, right?
Yeah.
So it's little things like that where, it just spurs more questions and conversations, and you keep learning.
Yeah. Dude, I've got just 3-4 like really big conversation questions that I'm been in my head this whole show, but we got to give some space for the book. And I want you, this is your latest and greatest, Get Wealthy for Sure, guys. MC Laubscher. You can find it on Amazon. I found it through MC's LinkedIn profile. You can click right to a link that's going to give you the ability to get it straight from, I'm assuming from your company, MC, and basically the price of shipping, right?
Yes. So what we're doing right now, the book is Get Wealthy for Sure, the #1 financial strategy for business owners to multiply wealth predictably. And as a business owner, real estate investing is a business. So we wrote it for business owners of all types of businesses. We're right now doing a free paperback copy. Just pay for shipping, and you could go to getwealthyforsure.com, getwealthyforsure.com, and that's where you can get and request a paperback copy of the book. But in the book, I just talk about a strategy that will enable you to get wealthy for sure. And it's just, with a strategic approach to things. And I talk a lot about family office, kind of like bringing it together in a strategy, efficient income, efficient positioning of capital, efficient deployment of capital, and then have different buckets, right? Know what you do when you're doing it, and know what you want that specific bucket to do for you. So one of the things that I talk about is a liquid savings and building up your own banking system with liquid savings. And this is what we specialize at Producers Wealth, to design these very specific life insurance policies in which family offices warehouse their capital. Having that and having always guaranteed access to capital, regardless of what happens, is going to enable you to grow your portfolio quicker than you would have ever thought possible. And also, when there's a down market or a pullback, you'll have guaranteed access to capital to go and buy assets at a discount. One of the lessons I learned in 2008, 2009, when I had some HELOCs pulled on me, is that you always want to have guaranteed access to capital. So it was a tough lesson to learn back then. That was my first downturn too. I was a young guy in real estate. I was able to weather the storm. It would make for a better story if I tell people I was completely wiped out and had to start over, but I was able to weather the storm. But the big lesson there is have a bucket of liquid cash that you always have guaranteed access to. And if you can build your banking system with these life insurance contracts, you'll always have access to financing to grow and scale. And that's why we call it Get Wealthy for sure. Having a bucket of savings and a bucket of investing, and knowing when you do what. With savings, for example, you want to put your capital into a vehicle where you're taking on a little bit less risk, getting a very conservative return. And with investing, as we said, you take on a little bit more risk for a higher return, and you can lose some or all of it. So those two combined, the one, savings, capital preservation, and access to capital, and the other one is growing your wealth significantly. So those 1-2 punches, is what we share in the book. But your listeners and viewers can grab a copy at getwealthyforsure.com.
Yeah, that's awesome stuff. Switching gears, kind of starting to round things out here. The AI piece. It's its own show. You and I could probably do a series of 3 shows on it. But the reality, the way that I talk, and I'm sure listeners are very well steeped in this conversation, and especially in terms of tools and the business tools, ChatGPT usage, that's then the other alternatives there. But I think where I start with people like, let's say my parents' generation, or people that don't really have their heads in, and they're probably every generation right now, most of the generations don't have their heads around the realities of what we're looking at with AI. And I think the reality is that none of us can really have our head around it, because there's an unknowability, as I like to say, about where this is all headed. And if you don't believe that, go to the experts, listen to the Musk and Sam Altmans of the world, and they'll be the first ones to tell you, like, in 5 years, certainly in 10 years, like, we really don't know how this is going to look. That said, I wonder, there's a few different levels here. We talked about the ability to create material, create content, books, audiobooks in particular. So you have a book written in your case, and AI can sample your voice so that you don't have to read the whole daggone book into a microphone. The AI can create that. I spent a lot of time in AI. I didn't know that was possible. And I'm sure that, a year or 2 years from now, I'll be like, yeah, duh, like, it does that and like 100 times more. But we're going to have an intelligence that we're coexisting with here in a few years that's hundreds, if not thousands, and then eventually hundreds of thousands and millions and billions of times more intelligent than we are. And like, for us to even pretend that we know what that means and how that's going to look like, I think the only thing anybody could say with authenticity and certainty is, like, there's not, like, life will be very, very, very different for us on a business level. And as an entrepreneur, to kind of bring this back to earth for a second, what how do you compartmentalize all that? And and you obviously implemented a lot of, currently available tools and whatnot. But I think what I'd like, bigger picture, I'd like to know like what your thoughts are on how you grow businesses from here forward.
It's interesting. I'm seeing it in my world already. So in the one space with Producers Wealth, we're in the life insurance space. There's AI is already very prominent in that. Just, I mean, in all facets of it. Underwriting, where some of these AI algos can underwrite life insurance policies better than humans can. It's wild.
Mm-hmm.
And then from a business standpoint, you got to market, you got to sell, and you have to fulfill. So in businesses, when you look at where you can implement it, incorporate it, there's already, with marketing, so many applications, from social media applications, content creation, Chat GPT in itself is like a tool unlike anything we've seen. So you can already incorporate it there. The sales is now like, every single website, it's kind of annoying because every website's got a bot, and try to get a hold of a human being is almost impossible. So
I know, and the bots just aren't that great yet. I think to be real, they're not good enough to replace live agency. But I think that will be soon very different than that.
Yes, and then on the fulfillment, we've already seen all these applications. So business for sure. How do you grow a business? You have to stay on the cutting edge of this. It's one thing that I'm making a priority because things change quickly and they change rapidly. And if you don't see it coming, the next thing, you don't have a business. So I'm continually looking at trends. We're just seeing the stuff that's rolled out, right? And we have no idea what's in the labs.
Right.
And I've spoken to a lot of people that have seen trials at big, large corporations, Amazon and so forth. And Apple, stuff that they're seeing is wild, from robotics, robots packing boxes, that kind of stuff. So it's very, very interesting. So no, you got to stay ahead of this trend.
That's that visual is like kind of exactly what I think too. Like this is a tremendous wave, and you got to get on the wave, and then you got to stay on the wave and ride it. Right. And and sometimes I think that's all there is to do in life, because Patrick Bet-David wrote the book, The Next 5 Steps. I think that was him.
Yeah.
And I think that's like a very nice idea. I think the reality is, and especially in today's rapidly changing world, I don't even, change isn't even the right word, but I don't know how possible that is, right? I think sometimes the next step, doing like the next step, and with maybe the step after that on your radar and in view as well, is what there is to do. And then I think the reality, like going back kind of full circle to the whole the vision, creating your vision thing. I've gotten really present because my company has a vivid vision. I have a vivid vision. My clients do. And I'm also like really clear, and I've had it for 3 years, I guess. And I'm clear that like visions are wonderful for knowing yourself, knowing what you're up to, knowing where you want to go, and like being very intentional about getting there. And then I think the kind of the magic in life comes from like life showing up, or whatever your higher power stuff, like the universe showing up and like surprising the heck out of you. A lot of times, whatever that step is that all of a sudden is in front of you that you had no idea was available is like, heck yeah, that's 10x better than what I had in mind. Right. Let's go. I think but I think being faithful to the process and then in relationship to AI, I think for me, it's a perfect opportunity to like focus on what we have like massive impact and influence over. And ultimately, we can be causing the matter in awful lot of our own realities and our businesses' realities and the people that we affect. And then kind of beyond that, there's kind of not a whole lot else you can do, right? Except keep your finger on the pulse and be aware of all your options and at any given point. Yeah. But one last question, you roll in some pretty amazing circles, right? Forbes, the round table. These conversations are they different? Like I would think in those circles that you probably have a lot of conversations like this, and you probably hear some things that none of the rest of us maybe even are privy to. Like, can you give us just a quick glimpse into what that's like?
Yeah. So the big thing about that too, the conversations is the impact. So this is, I think you're going to see so much disruption, and which is going to lead to a lot of like disgruntled people, or even I would say even civil unrest in a big part. A lot of people aren't thinking about that, because if you think about it, a lot of people don't, they won't understand what's happening, right? Because a lot of jobs will be replaced or no longer existing. So they're not prepared for this because nobody's telling them to be prepared for this. They think it's cool to ask questions of Chat GPT online and show their friends. That's about it. There's not thinking, first principles thinking, as Elon Musk always talks about, is understanding like what are the ripple effects of this and the impact of this overall.
Yeah.
If you think big picture, huge impact of jobs, just like the internet, the people that weren't prepared for it, a lot of businesses did shut down. A lot of jobs no longer existed, but the people that anticipated this were prepared, kept skills up to date, were able to benefit from it. So those are the types of conversations happening is, what's the ripple effects of all of this? How does it impact all of the different industries? And what's the net result? What does society look like? What does the world look like, in 5-10 years?
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt that, it's going to affect everything so profoundly. How can it not affect like our economic systems, right? And which are our employment systems, which are that's where resources get distributed essentially in our society. Like I said, there's so many different big conversations to have here. I love it. I can tell you do too, MC, but we're basically out of time. I got one last one for you, and that is, and I'm not going to let you, the answer to this one qualification, the answer can't be service. Okay. Cause I know that's what it's all about for you. I can tell, but what's the juiciest part of what you're up to right now? Is it the writing the books? Is it, the multiple podcasts? Is it all of it together? In particular, is there like, what is really lighting you up right now?
I'll summarize it in one word: impact. Just to have an impact. If I can make an impact in the lives of others, and that's why we're putting out so much content at Cashflow Ninja, and obviously at Producers Wealth, just trying to help as many people as possible through the book and through our services there. So I would, if I had to summarize it, it would be impact.
What I'm just going to dig on that for a sec. What does that give you? What's the payoff for you personally in producing as much impact as you do, which is amazing. It's massive.
Yeah, I think it's learning. I've been a student, a lifelong student, especially in the world that I'm in right now for the past 24 years. And all the things that I'd learned, I just wanted to put it out there and leave, this trail that was blazed, right? You blaze the trail. So let's leave some messages and lessons and share all the information instead of just keeping it. So that's the impact. If people find us and we have an impact on their life, that's the purpose.
Yeah. Listeners, hopefully that's lighting you up too. And you can feel how real that is. And, I would say this, if you really have some sort of strong presence of the satisfaction and meaning of serving other people, and you integrate that into what you're doing and delivering every day structurally inside of your systems and processes, like it will ignite and propel and fuel everything, your current success, your growth, your next level, which you might not even know about yet. You look at somebody like, when was it that you played rugby? When did you really dig into this? What was the end of that transition?
So that was, when I came over to the States, 2001. 2001 is when I really started to dig in. So that's what, 24 years?
Yeah. Okay. And then did you play rugby for a while in the States as well? I know you coached, right?
Yeah, up until 2007. And then I coached for 4 years
And that's when you got really busy. I mean, yeah. So you've been at it for a while, right? And there's going to be listeners out there that are going, well, I mean, I can't buy life insurance. I need to figure out how to flip this house and get out of this deal I'm in, whatever. Right.
Yep.
Like, I would say that, maybe the last thing I'd leave with is just the power of watching the greats do what they do.
Yep.
I mean, I think that's why we all are fascinated with sports. A lot of us are really fascinated with sports or music or whatever it is. And then doing what you do the best you can and just being faithful that you have that level of greatness in you somewhere doing something. And it very well may end up looking a lot like some of the things that MC's done, and it may look very different, but, and there's no getting it right. It's all about doing you, living the best version of you. And MC and I found apartments and took the ball and ran with it. It could be something different eventually for you, but you're listening to this show. So let's do apartments, right? Awesome stuff, man. I love this, MC. Thank you so much. And we've given them 100 resources here. Just what's the best way for people what's the first step they want to take to engage you on this stuff?
GetWealthyForSure.com for the book, and just cashflowninja.com for all of the alternative asset investing resources and alternative wealth strategies.
And then links to the podcast, right? The Cashflow Ninja podcast and all the books too, which Get Wealthy for Sure is the most recent of 4, I believe, that you've written. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. Awesome. Dude, thank you so much. We appreciate the tremendous value here in the conversation, and listeners, hopefully you got as much out of this as I know. I can't wait to go back and listen, because a lot of times when you're in the thick of creating one of these, you're like something that MCs will say that's just a gold, nugget. Yeah, you got to hear it twice, maybe 3 times. So hopefully this is of extreme value to you, and appreciate you guys, appreciate you, MC, and we'll see y'all in the next episode. Take care, everybody.
This has been the Apartment Gurus with Tate Siemer. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. To contact Tate, go to www.investwithgreenlight.com for access to his investor portal and Calendly link. He loves to hear from you and thanks you for being a valued listener. Just a reminder that you are the guru. See you on the next episode of the Apartment Gurus.